week's topic, which is acculturation, not to be confused with enculturation. Okay, so let's take a look at what that means and what you're going to be doing for this week. Okay, so your lesson objectives is to define acculturation, which I will be doing for you in just a minute. To understand Barry's acculturation model, okay, which is he divides it into 4 categories: assimilation, integration, separation, and marginalization. So you should be able to explain each one of those and to apply Barry's acculturation model in a real-world context. Okay, so the lessons for this week. This week I've divided up the worksheets depending on which lesson we are on. So lesson 1 is today, your acculturation strategies, where you need to identify and explain, and we'll look at that worksheet in just a minute. Lesson 2 will be on your experience with acculturation, and lesson 3 will deal with acculturative stress. Now this PowerPoint covers all of those, so you may want to go back to the slides and to my lecture to help you with each of the different lessons. Okay, so we have a new standard for this week, which is to assess the impact of cultural diffusion, globalization, on societies in different parts of the world. So what I'd like you to do on the worksheet is do number 1, which is to write that standard in your own words. Okay. Underneath that, you'll see on the worksheet that there is a place to write down notes during the lecture and to write down any questions you have. So when we get to the live session, you can ask any questions about anything you do not understand. So basically the definition of acculturation is internalizing the norms of the dominant culture where you have migrated. So basically a number of us have this experience where we have migrated, we have moved to the UAE, and we have to learn and to a certain extent adapt to the norms of the Emirati culture. Okay, so that is basically the definition. Okay, so the person that came up with the acculturation model is Dr. J.W. Barry. Now, he was a psychologist that has been studying how immigrants adapt to new cultures since the 1970s. He developed the concepts of acculturation strategies and acculturative stress through various studies from 1970s until now. He still is a working psychologist for a university in Canada. So back in 1974, he came up with these 4 different acculturation strategies that we will be looking at in detail in just a minute. He realized that people fit into one of these strategies during any time they move into a new culture. Okay, and he named these assimilation, integration, separation, and marginalization. So let's take a look at what these strategies mean. Okay, so assimilation. So this happens when people are open to change and they abandon their original culture. They openly seek interaction with other cultures and are willing to adjust their behavior, attitudes, and beliefs to the culture that they are now in. Okay, so a person like this would try to be completely absorbed into the new culture. They would learn the language. They would start to do the same types of traditions and rituals, maybe even moving into the religion. Okay, they would just completely adjust their behavior, their beliefs to match the new culture that they are in. The next is integration. Okay, integration are people that are interested in adopting behavior and values of their culture, but they still want to maintain aspects of their original culture. Now, this can really only happen when the dominant culture is open to accommodating cultural change. Okay, if you have a culture that is completely kind of traditional and kind of cut off from the world, integration would not be possible for people because it'll always be looked at as different. Okay, so basically this is kind of the middle ground where people are keeping their parts of their original culture, but also adapting some of the values of the new culture. Okay, this is where a lot of people fall into this category. This is something similar to those of us that have moved to the UAE, who still keep some of our home cultures, regardless what country we came from. But we also understand that, you know, in this culture you need to be more modest, so you dress more modestly, and you adopt some of the behaviors to help integrate and become a part of the culture, but also maintaining your own traditions and values. Okay, the next two are separation and marginalization. Um, Separation occurs when individuals place a really high value on their original culture. And they don't want to lose those traditions, rituals, and beliefs from their original culture. Okay, so they try to not interact very much with the new culture that they're in. Okay, and this can cause some obvious problems. Okay, they really try to avoid contact with the new culture. They do not take on any of the values or beliefs or attitudes of the new culture. They try to stay completely separate from it. And the last one is marginalization. So, marginalization occurs when a person is not really interested in their own culture, but they're not interested in other cultures either. Okay, now this could be because they are experiencing discrimination or exclusion from the dominant culture. Okay, so they really just don't know where they fit in. They don't fit in with their original culture, but they don't fit in with the new culture. Or this could be by personal choice, where they just don't express an interest in either one. However, the discrimination and exclusion could be made worse because the person has chosen not to try to get interested or not to get involved in either culture. Okay. All right, so here's two visual looks at these acculturation strategies. So you can see in the first image that is on the left, okay, so it has to do with your connection to your original culture, okay, here the connection to the new culture. So if you have a positive connection with the new culture and you have a positive connection with your own culture, you will probably fall into this integration. Okay. If you have a positive connection with the new culture, but your connection with your original culture is negative, maybe you had been discriminated against in your original culture, then you're looking to assimilate. You don't really want it to have anything to do with this original culture because your experience has been negative. So you want to move to the culture where you've had positives. Okay. If you have had a more negative connection with the new culture, but have positive connections with your original culture, you're going to probably fit into this category of separation. Okay. And if you haven't had negative experiences in your original culture and negative experiences in the new culture, you'll probably head into marginalization. Okay, a good example of this might be in India, in the Indian social classes. Those people of lower castes, so they're in the lowest classes, social classes. They're going to have a negative view of their original culture because they are discriminated against in their original culture. But moving here to the UAE or another culture, they may still be receiving discrimination because of where they come from. So in that case, they're probably going to feel marginalized. Okay. Another way to look at it is here. okay, where if you accept your host culture but reject the home culture, you're looking to assimilate. If you accept the host culture and want to retain your home culture, you integrate. If you're rejecting both cultures, it's marginalization, okay? And if you are rejecting the host culture but want to retain your home culture, you're getting into separation, excuse me. So this will hopefully visually help you understand the 4 strategies that Barry has come up with. Okay, so that's all you needed for lessons 1 and 2. So we're going to take a look at those worksheets before going on to acculturative stress. Okay, so the worksheet for lesson 1, which is today, as I said, you need to put the standard in your own words. Here's the area for your notes and questions from the lecture. Okay, your third question is you're going to have to identify and explain the strategy used by each of the people in the following scenarios. Okay, again, make sure that you explain the strategy used and not just identify it. So it's not enough to just say, once you've read it, that it was separation or it's marginalization. You need to explain how you've come up with that idea. Okay, so I believe you have 6 that you need to answer. Okay, this does not have to be very long, but you need to give me some examples that show the explanation of the acculturation strategy so that I can get an understanding and I can see that everyone or most people understand what the strategy is and why, because the rest of it won't make sense if we don't get this part correct. Okay. For lesson 2, you're going to be talking about your own acculturation experiences. Now, not all of you have lived in different countries, but most of you have probably at least visited different countries and have been able to experience a different culture to some extent. So the directions are: think about an experience you have had acculturating to a different culture. You may have moved to a different country, traveled to a different country, or to an unfamiliar region of your own country. Perhaps you've spent time with an ethnic or social class that's different from your own. Okay? Describe your acculturation experience in as much detail as possible. Think about how you felt when confronted with a different culture than your own and how you tried to deal with the differences. Okay, so obviously here, describe your acculturation experience. Where did you go? What did you experience? And again, really think about how it made you feel, because this is going to be an important part of lesson 3. Okay, and then so you need to analyze yourself and what acculturation strategy of Barry's did you use? And you need to, again, explain this in detail with examples. Okay, so going back to our presentation, for lesson 3, we're going to be talking about acculturative stress. Now, we all know when we go into a different situation, it can be very stressful. So when we're in an unknown situation. And as we know from our previous lessons on social identity theory and acculturation, when you don't feel like you're a part of the group, it can be very, very stressful. Okay, and the stress that's caused by acculturation is known as acculturative stress or culture shock. I'm sure lots of you heard that term, culture shock, or even reverse culture shock, when you've lived in a different area for most of your life and you return to your original culture. Okay, but we're going to be just looking at acculturative stress or culture shock. So acculturative stress often results in anxiety, depression, other forms of mental and physical stress. It may include it may include sleep disturbances, all sorts of different types of mental and physical stress. This is basically because the mental health and well-being of minorities tend to suffer as they're trying to adapt to a new culture. Okay, For some people, especially those that are discriminated against or marginalized, this may lead to obesity, substance abuse, or other health problems. Can lead to heart problems, all sorts of different kind of health problems that may or may not be connected to the obesity and substance abuse. Okay. Now, those people that move into new cultures and they have social support, either through family or friends that are already there, they're affluent, which means they have some money, they have maybe are wealthy, and or a degree of similarity with the new culture, may not experience acculturative stress or to a lesser degree. Okay. Stress is also determined by the acculturation strategy that's used by the individual. So as I said, if an individual chooses separation and marginalization, they are probably going to feel higher levels of stress than those that choose either assimilation or integration. Okay. But also assimilation can also cause quite a bit of stress. Okay. All right, so what you are going to do first, before you do the case study, which is our psychology in real life, let's take a look at the worksheet. Okay, so if we're looking at day 3 task, lesson 3 tasks, okay, I want you to think about, out of the 4 acculturation strategies used by Barry, which one do you think would cause the most acculturative stress? Explain. And I'm kind of giving you a few hints there, okay? But you need to break it down. Okay. Number 2, which one do you think would cause the least amount of acculturative stress? And explain. Now, I would prefer that you not go to the internet and copy what you read someplace else, okay? Unless you are like really, really stuck. Think about what we've already been doing and what we've been talking about. You know the 4 different acculturation strategies. Think about them critically, okay? And what ones you think would cause the least or the most amount of stress, okay? So number 3 is looking at your acculturation experience from lesson 2. Did you feel acculturative stress when you experienced a new culture? Why or why not? Now, this is why I told you when we looked at the lesson 2 worksheet to really think about how you were feeling when you're confronted with this new culture. Okay? So, thinking about that, thinking about what it was like to move to a new place or to spend time in a new place. Did you feel acculturative stress? Why or why not? What did you feel? Did you feel some anxiety and depression? Did things just move along great? You didn't have any problems. Okay, I know for me personally, it was very difficult. I felt a lot of acculturative stress when I moved to the UAE. It was very, very different from anything that I had experienced before. Okay, doesn't mean it was all negative, but it was very different, and it did cause me a lot of stress in trying to figure out how to integrate with this new culture after spending 8 years in Hong Kong and growing up in the United States. Okay, so it did cause me quite a bit of stress, and it took me a while to be able to figure out how to become more integrated and how to move through this culture without a huge amount of stress. It does definitely take time. Okay, all right. So then the last part, you are going to read this article here. And this is from the IB textbook for psychology. You're going to start at the psychology in real life. Okay. So what this article talks about is a family that moved to Canada, and they took part in some honor killing in their family. Okay, the father felt shame due to the actions of some of the females, the daughters in his family, and because they were acculturating differently than he was. Okay, and this resulted in honor killings of his daughters. So back to the worksheet. Once you've read it, then you have 4 questions to answer. Okay, and remember to use proper terms in your answers. So that would be using, acculturative stress, using the terms for the different acculturation strategies. Okay, so the 4 questions are: do you think acculturative stress played a role in the deaths of the Shafia girls? Why do you think it was difficult for the girls' parents to adapt to the cultural norms of life in Canada? Number 3, to what extent should cultures be accepting and understanding of the norms and values of immigrants? Okay, and 4, do you believe that immigrants and refugees should assimilate to the culture of their new homes? Okay, and that is your last assignment of the week. Okay. All right then, and just so you see that we also do MLA sites. I've added my bibliography at the end, so you can see what I've used to come up with this lesson. If you have any questions about this lesson or any of the worksheets, please talk to your teacher, and they can help you through it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you're having a good week, and I'll talk to you, or your teacher will talk to you during the week. See you later. Bye-bye.